Welcome to this video about Care Act duties on carers assessments. Please note we have other videos about this topic on the Sky website, alongside other resources and a handout with key messages and reflective questions. My name is Jackie and with me today is Kevin, and we are going to be talking about the Care Act duties for carers assessments. Hi Kevin. The duty under the Care Act for carers assessment is to assess an individual's need for support to enable them to achieve outcomes which are important to them in day-to-day life and to be able to provide necessary care to an adult. Wonder what that means for you, Kevin, in your experience as a carer?
Hi, Jackie. Yes. What I found is that, after a number of years actually of caring and also providing care awareness training, I actually found it very, very difficult to focus on what I needed in order to improve my quality of life, to maintain my quality of life. It was always about what needed to be and could be done for my mum in order to do that. So that's really what it means, is the fact that is that often we don't put ourselves first. I actually help host or facilitate a male amend carers online support group, and the men there, 3 of them said, yeah, it doesn't matter what I'm like, as long, everything is about the person I care for, and the rest of the men all nodded. So that's what it means. What should it mean, of course, is, as I've said, is about our own quality of life, what it is we need to have our own health and well-being. And that's what we're going to talk more about today, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And absolutely, I think that is really something for, as a social care professional and practitioner, it's something that we really need to be aware of when we're doing carers assessments. It's about your ability to be a carer, your own health and well-being, and not to focus in on your role as the person who, is the carer for the person with care needs. So I think that's really important for us to have that at the forefront of our mind. One of the other duties is around the assessment being not an assessment of eligibility to meet the specified outcomes. So I'm just wondering, from your experiences going through a carers assessment, how did that feel, talking about what was important to you to come out of the assessment, and in terms of how eligibility felt for you? Was that explained to you or described to you in any way?
I don't think I thought about eligibility. I'm not even, I thought about need, because a lot of people that do caring roles, they've given up thinking about themselves. They're always thinking about what the person they care for, the people they care for, actually need. So I think a lot of us have lost sight of what we want or what we need or we would like to do. So I think that is really the biggest stumbling block, is starting to think about yourself and what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of when you went through that process, was there anything that these social care practitioner could do during that assessment that would help you focus in on you? Were there sort of questions that they could ask you, or to encourage you to think about that from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. The first time we had a carers assessment, didn't even realise we'd had it. It sort of flowed in from my mother's community care assessment, as it was then, as opposed to the assessment of needs as it is now. And basically, we didn't see the transition. We didn't notice the transition. We didn't understand the transition. So I think it is really about, making it clear that this is about you. An example, my dad with his GP said, we've got to keep you well because you care for your wife. No, so that's not a social worker one, that's a health one. But you can see the same sort of issue. If you think that the carers assessment is about making sure you can continue to care for the person you're caring for, it's not got off to a good start.
No, absolutely not. And I was, yes, as a social care practitioner, I was worried that that wasn't explained to you, that you were having a carers assessment as well. So there's something about being really clear and about what is about to happen, what is a carers assessment, and I guess in a way as well for you to have had time to think about it beforehand, to see what you would have liked out of that process too. Which you didn't have that opportunity to do, as it happened without really your knowledge or engagement really beforehand.
Yeah, the mental health trust I work with have got actually a carers assessment pre-assessment guide, which again, if you're not in crisis, is a really good thing. But so many of these things are at a time of crisis, and as you say, I think people do think it's assessing them for whether they are doing or able to do a good role of caring. I don't. Well, certainly I never dwelt too much on that, but I do believe people are doing that, and it's the ability to know what's expected of you and what is there is a great leaflet in this case, but you cannot guarantee that anybody will or has read it. You've always got to assume that the person doesn't know what it is that's happening.
Yeah, that's right. I think so. That's really important to know. And I really like the point you made then as well about people feeling they might be being assessed as how good a carer they might be. And that's obviously something that is not part of this process. This is all about putting carers first and understanding how we can best support them in the role and promote their own well-being. So I think there is something around reassuring people that this carers assessment is not about measuring how good or not they are about being a carer, because I think that could put people off actually wanting a carers assessment.
Well, I have no doubt that it will. Some people don't like to register with their doctors as carers. We talk about being spouses, oh, it's my loved one and these sorts of things, but they believe that there's a liability that's attached to that. So I'm sure that many people do not register with their carers or other groups as a carer for that reason. They're happy to do the job, but they're not happy with that label of liability, which of course it's not. But
yes,
think it is.
Absolutely. And I think also something that I think we're going to be talking about in a bit more detail later on is around even just identifying as a carer, because when we're looking after, people we love, we don't often see ourselves as a carer. And I think there's something there, isn't there? There's a conversation. I know we're going to have a look at that in a bit more detail about getting people to recognise their role as a carer, and that they are eligible for help, care and support in that role in their own right. So I think that's really, really interesting. And so we kind of touched on it about the purpose under the Care Act. The purpose of the carers assessment is to identify personal outcomes, existing needs and impact on individual priorities, which includes individual well-being and your caring role. So was that conversation ever a part for you, Kevin? Did anybody really sort of focus in on what potential outcomes you would have liked as part of that assessment in terms of the impact on other, not just on your caring role, but other elements of your life?
So one of the things is that we talked about, we haven't yet, but about main carers. The fact, fortunately, Dad and I were a team. We were a team, and because he was a husband, he was the main carer as far as I was concerned, and I still had a life because I was the son in that respect. And so I think, from my point of view, a lot of it was thinking about what my dad needed, and certainly we had effective outcomes from that. In that we had the care workers, but I still like to call them sitters or befrienders, because although they might be more than that, it is different from having personal care and health care in that way. And that meant he could go and play golf. Yeah, he learnt to play golf at 65. So he learnt to play golf, and he would go and he would do 18 holes of golf in about 2.5 hours on his own. He would go there, do that, and come back again in the morning. Then as my mum progressed, her disease progressed, dementia, he would do it sort of later. But he never knew he could have back-to-back carers, so he could have gone for a full game. He was playing on his own. So I think it's really that even when it is about your quality of life, it's amazing how a little bit of information can change that to a completely different level of quality of life. Like he could have gone and played with members of the club that he was at, where instead of playing a round of golf on his own because he had to get back in time and things like that. So it was improving. It was improving in that sense. We also had, I'll give you some examples. We also had they've changed the grants over the years, and it's now direct payments. But we both went to the gym together. and we went for a swim, and he used to like swimming and other things, and so we did that, and these things are good because they not only improve your quality of life, they also improve your health, which is really a really good side effect of these opportunities. So yes, eventually, I suppose is what I'm saying.
Yes,
and a lot of what I learnt was because I was closely involved with, sort of volunteering and that with our local carer charity. I don't believe I would have ever twigged if I hadn't.
Right. So I think, again, from sort of the social care practitioners' point of view, it would be really, really helpful to make sure those discussions and those questions and reflections come out during the process of the carer's assessment, because, there would be opportunities there to say, actually, you can do this. And, as you say, playing golf sounds amazing for your dad, and it would have been great if he could have been out there for a little bit longer, and it was a shame that wasn't a conversation or an offer that was clearly made. But I think unless you have those discussions and those questions, we don't really know what's actually going to support a carer in their role. And that's really why it's so important, isn't it, that it is a structured conversation between the social care practitioner and the carer as to what would be good outcomes to help support the carer promote their own individual well-being, and to help them be sustainable in their caring role. And you mentioned something earlier about if a carer was in crisis. I just wondered if you wanted to explain a little bit more about that, because it is about, isn't it, getting that carer's assessment at a time when things can happen and help you be supportive. And I guess it feels a little bit different if things are starting to break down and there's a lot more stress in the caring role.
Absolutely. And the how long is a piece of string, really? But when does crisis start? I found out at a carer support group quite some years later that my dad used to go out into the conservatory and just scream, right? Just scream to to do that, because he cared for my mum wonderfully, but it wasn't really his nature, shall we say. He was fighting, in that respect, and he would do that, and you would come. Yeah, it often is a Friday. I'm sure it wasn't always a Friday, but he would be at breaking point in that sense, and he'd ring up for help, and they'd say, call back on Monday, or we'll get back to you in a period of time, or whatever. And all he really wanted someone to say, we'll see, we'll send someone around tomorrow. Even that would have been enough, because by tomorrow he'd calmed down, and it would have been resolved. So the crisis, in my experience, crisis, certainly with elderly loved ones and the people you care for, is that it's often things. What goes is maybe violence. Mum was 5 foot tall. When Mum went into respite, there was a lady there who looked after a gentleman who was 6 foot tall, and she couldn't, unfortunately, keep him safe anymore, and herself safe. Whereas we had no problems in that respect. But for many people, it's either that, or it's the toileting. Yeah, toileting. People not knowing where to go and the mess they do. That is often what causes carer breakdown. Yeah. So those are the physical thing, but equally the mental side of it, in the sense is that it's been shown that carers who care for people invariably, a lot of them end up with health conditions, mental health conditions. So it is having that support and having regular respite. We used to get quite regular respite in an elderly mentally infirm unit, and it was no longer a suitable place for my mum anymore, because its function was changing. It was becoming a more and more assessment unit and what have you. So we tried to convert that to have been cared at home and us to go on holiday. And we tried to work out the calculations for that and everything else. But there is a need for respite which is regular. It's got to be preempted. And I hear stories of care practitioners, social care practitioners, having all these requests on a Friday night, and trying to find somewhere to place people on a Friday night. I do believe that would not be the case if people could have a regular respite in that way. So crisis prevention, carer breakdown, and then once it's broken down, I believe it's very rare that somebody would come out of a care home, a nursing home or whatever.
Yeah. And absolutely. So, I mean, having that conversation around when it leads to a really difficult time for a carer, whether, as you say, it's their mental health, coping with the physical aspects of caring, not getting enough sleep, just not having a break. And actually, as part of a carer's assessment, if you can say, do you know what, I just want to go and have a couple of hours in the hairdressers, or a couple of hours on the golf course, or sit in the library, or whatever it is that you need to do, and have that break, and know that the person you're caring for is well looked after, is what that sets you up for the week, doesn't it? That can be enough to keep you going and keep you keep your own well-being, but also in your role as a carer. And I know we've sort of touched on it previously, but as part of the assessment, and I think this is something that we've mentioned, is the assessor should actually talk to the carer about how caring affects your life.
Yeah.
Including physical, mental and emotional needs, just as we were saying, how important that is. Your role as a carer, how you feel about caring. Actually, that's a conversation that needs to take place as part of a carer's assessment, and crucially, whether you're able or willing to carry on as a carer. So I don't know whether in your experience, has that ever been a conversation that you've had, or somebody's ever even suggested that's a possibility to talk about?
I'll do it from another. I tried to get what we call making a difference payment. At the start of COVID, everything went online, right? Everything went online, and my computer wasn't up to it. Yeah, it just wasn't up to it. It was quite an old laptop and everything else. And I knew that they were giving out computers to people to be included in a variety of ways. The organisation that I actually went to actually get a computer, an upgrade, a different one, a replacement for that, said that they would not, it wasn't available because it doesn't help me in my caring role. As you can tell, that's completely the opposite. And that wasn't a social care practitioner, but it was somebody who should have known better in lots of ways. And I was then signposted to another charity that maybe would get me one, would be able to get me one. But it probably would be means tested in some way anyway, sort of thing in that respect. So what am I saying? I mean, signposting doesn't work with carers as far as I can tell, especially when you're in a crisis. We were talking about a crisis before. Signposting doesn't work. How many times have I come home? We actually got rid of a box full of it the other day, of leaflets that you collect when you go to talks and what have you, and you never look at them. By the time you've got home, you're back to your caring role. You never look at them, and a lot of them are very good, very, very good. I've even co-produced some of them, but when you're in a crisis, you don't, and so that is what crisis does to the caring role. The other side of that regarding caring is that that people around you don't realise what you're going through. Yeah, that is something. My dad, for many, my mum had dementia, and we eventually, it was like a caring, dementia friends or carer badge, so that he would actually tell people that my mum had dementia because they didn't get it, and he felt very alone in that aspect. So that when you lose somebody to dementia in that way, it's a very lonely existence. It's a very lonely life. So when they die, people think that eases it, which it doesn't, of course. But it is a very strange journey. It is a very strange journey in how you deal with that. And I wasn't going to come up, but bereavement, and caring doesn't stop when someone gets moved into a care home, and the carer's needs doesn't stop when the person is no longer under their care for whatever reason. And it's really good. The organisation we have is 3 years before you're sort of officially discharged, but they don't discharge you even then from transfer unit. So yeah, and we did have an interesting one where some carers wanted to volunteer with a caring organisation, a caring charity, and people said, well, that's not a break. Yes, it was. It was a break, because you're not caring for the person you care for. You know, it is a break still. So there's some very interesting opinions people have of what carers need.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, so it needs to be driven, doesn't it, by by the carer and what their needs are. And as you say, I think whether it's work or education or training opportunities, voluntary opportunities, you know, they are all breaks, aren't they? They are doing something different, an opportunity to do something outside of your caring role. And so I think it really needs to be discussed as part of the assessment. Kevin, it's been such a delight speaking with you. I think we will be talking about some more of these challenges that we have in terms of carers assessments in other videos. So I think for our listeners, I would just like to say, please do check out our website for further videos and other resources, and hope to you will be able to join us again soon. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.